Usually when you hear about cloning or tracing a pattern, you see this method: laying out a garment flat and tracing the edges to build up the pattern. It's like DIY Sewing 101. Everyone's made that film. I've made that film. But garments aren't flat, and if you're working on anything more complex than a t-shirt, the whole process becomes much more complicated, and the accuracy of the final pattern can't be guaranteed. But there is another method, always mentioned, but I've never actually seen a tutorial for. I'll call it destructive pattern drafting. Let's see if it's actually useful.
This used to be my favourite t-shirt. Not just because it's a remnant of the 123 clan. More than anything, it's the fit. It's too far gone. I'm not going to try and repair it, but I could clone it.
The first step is to examine the garment. It's a tubular tee, meaning there are no side seams. I take notes on the different seam allowances used across the garment. I'll also try and figure out how the garment was assembled. On this tee, there was no bottom hem. It looks like the cuffs were turned in, then joined on the underarm. The sleeves were attached to the armhole, but one sleeve was left partially open. The collar was added like bias binding, probably trimmed to fit, then the open sleeve was serged closed joining the collar, with a bar tack added to secure. I'm going to unpick the garment in the same order, reversed. Unpicking is a tutorial in its own right, but here are the cliff notes. These serge seams are really strong, and if you try to rush the process, you're going to end up damaging the fabric. I don't rip open the seams or push into the seams with the round end. I stretch the seam over my knuckle and saw at the threads at an angle. It's slow, but if your goal is to open up the seam with no damage, this is the best option when working with thin fabrics. After less time than you would imagine, I have all the panels disassembled. I press the garment and I'm ready to clone. I started with the body, but I dropped my focus, so we'll come back to that. I lay out some flip chart paper and the sleeve panel on top and mark the edges with dots, adding more around the curves. I'm going to pause here and we can see the benefit of cloning in this way. The sleeve is not symmetrical, and laying it flat would either make you think it was, or you would lose accuracy while repositioning the sleeve to mark the edge. This is definitely the better way to do this. Anyway, I can now play join the dots to get the shape. I'm much rougher when figuring out the shape of the turned cuffs, as this is less crucial to the overall fit. Finally, I add 4mm of seam allowance. This is added to the garment's original seam allowance, giving me the 8mm I use for almost all my projects on my domestic machine. Going back to the body, I need to tape 2 bits of paper together to make a sheet large enough for the panel. When laying out, I focused on making sure the underarm seam was perfectly lined up, as this is the most crucial to get right, and flattened out the garment from there. The rest of the process was much the same, except I had to figure out the center point for the pattern. This will be my side seam when making my own version, and I'll probably trace off a front and back pattern from this that I will cut on the fold.
Okay, so this is where we're going to stop. I'm not actually going to make the full t-shirt in this film. I will do it at some point, and when I do, I'll link it up with the card thing. Having worked with a bunch of raglan sleeve patterns before, this looks spot on. I'm very happy to move forward with this. I'm fairly confident that this is going to be the right thing. I'm definitely not going to feel the need to make a toile before I start. I will say though, I must sound a bit like anti-pattern cloning in the traditional way with the drawn out and stuff like that. And I'm not. Like I've used that method and gotten a great t-shirt out of it and I'm very, very happy with it. I'm just offering you another option to consider, and there are positives to both. What I would say about disruptive patterning, it's super accurate, and the more time you spend with it and the more effort you put in, the more accurate it will be. Also, I would say it's much easier to trace like flat bits of fabric than having to like do the whole turning around and manipulating of a constructed garment. Where it's not so good, it obviously takes longer. The unpicking process is going to take a bit of time, and of course you're going to have to destroy your clothes in order to get the raw pattern. So it's definitely a process for an item of clothing that you literally cannot wear anymore and you cannot repair, but you really, really enjoyed wearing, and you want to make other garments in its image. What I would say about tracing is it's quick. You're going to get a result that you can immediately turn into a garment. Most of the time, it's going to be good enough. You're going to be able to go through that process and have a pattern that will get you 95% of the way there. What I would say though, if you're tracing, you're going to want to make a toile. So if you really if you just want to get sewing, definitely tracing's the way to go. If you want to replace something that is gone, that you just can't wear anymore, destructive is the way to go. I hope that was really useful or interesting or distracting, you know? Like, that project's been in the back of my head for a really, really long time, and I really wanted to make that film, so I'm really happy to get it over the line and out into the world. Thanks very much for watching. I hope that was useful to you. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Otherwise, I don't know, like and subscribe, you know, you could do all those things. I don't really have a sign off on this channel, so I guess